Imposter syndrome is a thing. It is a pernicious psychological phenomenon. When you have imposter syndrome, you feel inadequate, like a fraud, undeserving of your position, like you don't belong in a job or a role that you really are already in. Imposter syndrome manifests itself in incessant worry that you'll be found out, that someone will suddenly realize that you are not as intelligent, qualified, or even as cool as they think you are. This project is not about researching imposter syndrome or even about telling you how to cure your own imposter syndrome. This project is real life testimonials. People from all over the world with different backgrounds and occupations, all who've experienced this same phenomenon. This project is not about solving the problem of imposter syndrome. It's about bringing to you an awareness that you're not alone. It's about showing all of us that there is hope to cope. Let me tell you about Tracy. I met Tracy online. We're part of the same learning and development industry and community. She is amazing. Tracy has this long list of awesome roles over 25 years at a Fortune 500 company. See her LinkedIn if you want to know which one. She also just published a book in 2017. She has 2 masters and a PhD. She teaches college courses as an adjunct professor, and she recently launched Upskill University to help people elevate their skills, network with others, and gain confidence. And she's a breast cancer survivor. Tracy, you are so cool. Thank you for sharing your story with us. So, tell us about you.
Hi. I am Dr. Tracy Shroyer, and oh my gosh. So I am Dr. Tracy Shroyer, and I live in Ohio. I was born and raised here, never really left, and been married for over 20 years to my husband, Tony. And we don't have any kids. We have little fur balls, 2 Australian Shepherds. And I actually have been at the same company for, it'll be 25 years in June, and it's in the financial services industry. I've jumped around to different roles every 3 to 4 years, but the company has been really great. In addition to that, I also started teaching at the college level about 6 or 7 years ago and really enjoyed doing that. And even just a couple years, actually mid 2020, I started teaching at the graduate level at a different university. And in addition to that, my background, my educational experience, I got my master's in business administration. I got an MBA. Was crazy enough to go on and did my PhD while I was working full time. And it took me about 6 years to get through my PhD program. And after I was done with my PhD, my husband asked me what I wanted to do. And I said I wanted to go back to school, but I couldn't afford it. So I continued working. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do from there. And actually wrote a book based on my dissertation. And eventually, 5 years after I graduated with my PhD, I went back to school because of the tuition assistance program at my job had changed and they were covering 90% of tuition. So I went back and got my master's in organizational psychology and decided to launch my business that I currently have. It's called Upskill University. After in 2020, before everybody even knew what the pandemic was, I actually found out in January of 2020 that I had breast cancer, which kind of came out of the blue. I had a history of cancer in my family, but I did not carry the gene. There was a gene mutation that went through pretty much all the women, but my dad did not carry that on. And so, in battling breast cancer through 2020, I knew I'd been wanting to do something entrepreneur wise. And so, when I had gotten through all my surgery and came out the end of that in late 2020, I decided to launch my business. So I did that in late 2020 and it's been going really well. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, a little bit about me.
And you're in full remission.
I am. Yes. Yes. I have actually
Okay,
just
great.
passed my 1 year mark. February 13th was my 1 year cancer free anniversary.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
pretty
you.
awesome.
Yes.
Um, I don't want to get too caught up on that, but yes, I'm so happy. We're all so happy to hear that. Um, I'm going to pause for a second. Do I sound
Okay.
the same? Is it coming from this mic?
You sound fine.
Did you hear the tapping?
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear that.
Okay. Am I okay? I'm just making sure because it says microphone unknown. So at this point, I'm ready to
Oh.
throw Zencaster in the trash. What is happening? I don't know
After
why
all
it's
those
saying that.
nice
Okay,
things you
it's fine.
said.
Doesn't I know after all those nice things and now it's crapping out on us. Okay, it's fine. Um so what would you say are and you mentioned a few, but what would you say are some of your greatest accomplishments? I mean, definitely the PhD.
Mhm.
Anything else that you'd throw in there? Surviving cancer.
Yep. Yeah. I would say another one I think would be a big accomplishment for me is really coming out of my shell. I'm an introvert, and I know that doesn't mean the
Mm,
same thing as being a shy person, but like 3 or 4 years ago, I would never have done some of the things that I do now and been as open to doing different things. So through some of my experiences, I just feel like that's shifted how I present myself and just my
mhm.
personal branding and all of that has really come together over the years.
Yeah. Let me ask that question, sort of flip it a little bit. What would
Okay.
others say about you? What would they say are your biggest accomplishments?
So along the lines of the same thing, the completing my PhD, um, I strength and courage are big ones. Through everything that I've gone through with my cancer, with
Mhm.
I've actually helped a family member years ago that was struggling with mental illness and becoming an advocate to help that person. And even doing that more recently, helping another family member through some of those things. So just very supportive, courageous.
Mhm. Mhm. So what has been your experience then with imposter syndrome?
So I would say my imposter syndrome really dates back to when I was even getting ready to go into kindergarten. I remember having the conversation with my mom about how nervous I was, and I can't do this. Like, I cannot do this. Like, I'm gonna fail. I'm not gonna get through. My mom's like, "You are going to be fine. Like, just go and do it." And I was never like throughout school. I was never a straight A student. I was a good student, not honor society, but you know what I mean. Like, good. You didn't have to worry I was going to fail my classes or
Mhm.
anything.
Yeah.
But I was always worried that I would never be able to get to that next level. And I feel like it's that imposter syndrome. Like, even though I could do it, I was smart enough and, I had the knowledge, I had the skills and the ability. I was just always worried that it was like somebody would figure you out and, not pass you and you'd get stuck. So I feel like even from that young age, because I remember
Yeah.
talking to my mom even before I enrolled for my PhD program. I talked to my mom, I talked to a couple coworkers, and I was like, I'm terrified to do this because what if I fail? Like, what if I can't do it? And they're like they still had to give me the
Mhm.
motivation and the courage and really pump me up and, look at all the things you've done to date to get here. And my mom even reminding me every time, like every grade you struggled and you thought that, something was going to happen and you weren't going to be able to make it and you were perfectly fine. Like you never had any problems.
Yeah. Yeah. So so that's got to be the earliest encounter with imposter syndrome I've heard so far. Kindergarten. But I mean, hey, it's if you remember it, it must have happened.
Well,
Um,
I would say my mom gets
so what
credit for
does it
that one.
feel
She
like?
remembered it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. You get credit, mom. Good job. What does it feel like for you to be in an episode of imposter syndrome? Because I'm assuming you still struggle with this.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah, and I had written down a few notes. It's for me, it's been really that fear of judgment. I've had anxiety, just the feeling of unknown of what's going to happen. Like people think I'm good enough to do this, and what if they find out I'm kind of sometimes I'm making it up as I go. I'm trying to figure it out just as much as the next person. Um, so yeah, I guess a lot of
Hmm.
anxiety and fear around it.
Are there other emotions that come up, or other thoughts that kind of come up in your head?
Um, I don't think so. I think it's really just that fear, being scared.
Yeah, yeah, being scared. Any physical
Yeah.
reactions that you find when you're sort of having an episode of imposter syndrome?
Um, I know my face probably gets all red. Just the blood pressure
Mhm.
rising and the um, just that kind of reaction. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe your breathing is kinda, like, a little more shallow.
Hmm.
When was your most recent imposter syndrome episode? What would you say was the most recent one?
So I would say it has to do with launching my business that I just got ready to, at the end of last year, get ready to launch out and start it. Because part of that fear was I was doing something that I feel like a lot of other people haven't, but in another sense, a lot of people have. You know, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there,
Mhm,
but none that have really done what I've seen that I'm actually doing. So I think it was a fear of somebody's going to ask me that question that makes me second guess myself and like, who am I to do this? And I know a lot of
mhm,
people to help motivate me and talk me through it and encourage me to continue to go forward is why not you? You know, who else or why not you to go forward and do this?
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when you have these episodes of imposter syndrome, how do you cope? Like, what do you have techniques that you put into practice? Do you have, um, what makes it better?
Yeah. So, as far as techniques or strategies that I use, one of the things is when I first start to go into something, even before I feel that imposter syndrome, is trying not to set too high of expectations. Rather, here's what I'm going to do. And then if I'm able to do way better than that, great. But really setting the bar,
Mhm,
and if I need to or if I want to or if I can, going above that, but not setting too high of expectations for myself and going into that. The other thing is, I was thinking about is my brainstorming process. And I think I have to be really careful because my brainstorming process looks a lot like people's final products. So I have to be careful in talking about that sometimes or in looking at and brainstorming and putting context around that to help people understand what I'm doing versus this is what, this is going to
mhm,
be the end product and what it looks like. So another thing I would say is being open to criticism because I feel like one of the things that I've done in the past is I get myself so encouraged and so excited about something that I'm going to do and roll it out. And in the past, it's been like you start to get criticism on it and you feel crushed and defeated. Like, and it almost
mhm.
helps you to validate the fact that you feel like you're an imposter. Whereas if I start
Yep.
earlier in the process and accept that constructive criticism and realize when I start out it's not my final product or it's a work in progress, then it's easier to deal with along the way. And I don't feel as much of that imposter syndrome as if I would, feel like I'm delivering that final thing and then getting that crushing feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting technique to sort of, set that expectation or change those expectations. Do you ever find yourself, even if you've already done that, still feeling like, "Who am I? What am I doing? Why would they listen to me?"
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything in the moment that you do to kind of mitigate those feelings?
That's a good question. Sometimes I really have to think about and even go back to like, why am I either working on, whatever I'm doing when I start to feel that? And almost like give yourself your own pep talk inside. Like change that self talk and make
Mhm.
sure that there's more positive self talk of, I'm on this project or I'm doing this because I have this expertise, I have these skills, and pepping myself up and letting myself know that I'm good enough, and which is I think hard to do for yourself. It's easier when other people are doing that and
Yes.
encouraging you and telling you, but trying to change your own mindset and put those things into your head, um, yeah, it's definitely hard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agreed.
I can
What would
tell
you
you.
share with someone who Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, one of the things that was really interesting is when I was going through my PhD program, still still worrying about when I was going through my PhD program, whether I was good enough to do this program and um,
Uh-huh.
be the person to research this information and to make recommendations and do this analysis. And the whole time I was going through my PhD program, I didn't like to tell people I was doing it because I felt like I would be judged in a certain way, and I was just
Mhm.
scared to death of that, and everywhere we went, my husband would be like, "Oh, she's working on her PhD," and I'm like, "Shut up! Don't tell anybody," because it was kinda like feeling like you'd be figured out. Right, right, right. So
Mhm.
I would
Yeah.
say it's only been and, I've been done with my program for over 8 years, and maybe the last 5 I've been comfortable with telling people I'm Dr. Tracy Shroyer. It's been a long road to get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, and one thing we didn't record is when we started talking, I said, "Can am I allowed to call you Tracy?" And you were like I wish I had recorded it because you were like, "Well, you're not one of my students, so it's okay." And, like, you, like, ducked your head down, like, you were like, "Yes, just call me Tracy, this fine." And, I wish we would've been recording because it's a perfect example of that little voice in your head being like, "Oh, I'm not gonna make her call me doctor." Which I totally
Right?
would if you want me to, um, but yeah, I think that's interesting.
That's funny.
All right, so what would you share with someone who is experiencing imposter syndrome?
I would say if you're experiencing imposter syndrome, my advice would be to put that more positive self-talk into your head. And maybe even if there's certain like little affirmations you can write, whether it's keeping them in your pocket or on your desk or in your purse or whatnot, and being able to continually tell yourself, I almost feel like if you remember the old Saturday Night Lives, like you're good enough, you're smart enough, and I can't remember what the rest of it was, but he would look in the mirror and like say
And
these
gosh dang
affirmations.
it, people like you.
that I mean, you really have to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
that into your head and tell yourself that. Yeah.
yes, yes, and I reminded of, it's funny you said that, What About Bob? And he would stand there and talk to himself in the mirror. What did he say? I don't know, somebody will remember, but yeah, um, oh gosh,
We watched
it
that
was something like that.
not too long
Um,
ago. Yeah.
Great movie,
Yeah.
great movie.
Yeah.
So I think that's great advice. And so the last question I have for you, Tracy, is why did you want to be part of this imposter syndrome project? What made you raise your hand and say yes, please?
Well, I would say the reason that
Hmm.
I raised my hand to be a part of this project is I felt like when I had it early on that people who had their PhDs or people who are more accomplished in business, like I felt like you got to a certain point and you didn't have it anymore. And that's so not true. I think And now that I do have
Uh-huh.
that PhD, now that I have been in business for a long time, or worked and starting my own business, I think you're going to continue to have it. It doesn't stop when you get to a certain point. So I wanted to make sure that, and I'm sure you do within the project, is have people across all different spectrums of, working or going to school or, all different phases of life, and to make sure that you got that perspective too from where I am now.
And we appreciate that. We appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story. It's definitely something that I think is going to help many. So, thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, thank you.
If you like this series and you want to show support, go to buymeacoffee.com/ifyouaskbetty to learn more about how you can support this and future If You Ask Betty projects.